Welcome to This Explainer. Right off the bat, we are diving into a fascinating and, frankly, deeply uncomfortable question drawn straight from our source material. We're looking at what happens when the economy crashes and everyday people are left struggling. The big question is exactly who is getting rich? So let's start with the ultimate paradox we're all living through right now. I mean, you hear it on the news constantly, right? Markets are up, corporate profits are soaring, and officially the system is totally fine. But just look around. If the economy is supposedly doing so well, why is everyone struggling? Where is all that money actually going? Well, we are living in a tale of two completely different realities. On paper, we've got this official macroeconomic narrative where everything points up and everything is growing. But in everyday reality, rent is higher. Buying groceries is physically painful, and debt is just crushing people. For the average person, jobs feel way less secure, and just trying to save a few bucks feels like an uphill battle, as our sources point out. Even basic stability has essentially become a luxury product. Okay, moving to Section 1, the money moves mechanism. Money does not disappear in a crisis, it moves. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that wealth isn't just evaporating into thin air during tough times, it's actively transferring. Think about it. One person's rising cost is literally someone else's revenue stream. When inflation spikes, your higher grocery bill, that becomes record corporate profit. When interest rates climb, your expensive mortgage becomes a bank's direct income. And as housing gets totally unaffordable, a renter's painful monthly payment becomes a landlord's reliable asset yield. This isn't just a streak of bad luck for everyday folks, it is a structural transfer of wealth. And history backs this up entirely. An economy doesn't have to fully collapse for people to lose faith in it. It just has to work a little too well for the wrong people. We can actually trace this exact same pattern across centuries, from ancient Rome all the way up to the 2008 global financial crisis. Which brings us to Section 2, Ancient Rome. Gains are captured, costs are socialized. Back in the Roman Republic, small farmers who were actually the backbone of Rome's citizen army would go off to fight wars. But when they came back, they often found their farms were lost or hopelessly drowning in debt. Meanwhile, wealthy aristocrats had quietly accumulated these massive estates, often using enslaved labor captured during those exact same wars. So Rome itself was getting richer, but ordinary Romans absolutely were not. When the Gracchi brothers attempted some basic land reform in 133 BCE to try and fix this, the elites violently resisted. It showed that while Rome looked mathematically successful on paper, it was completely hollowing out its own foundations by squeezing the very citizens who built it. All right, Section 3, France 1789. Sacrifice becomes one-sided. Fast forward to the late 1700s, and the French monarchy was absolutely drowning in debt. But notice how the sacrifice to fix it was completely one-sided. The financial burden fell heavily on the working class, while the nobility just got to enjoy total tax immunity. As our sources highlight, a hungry population doesn't experience inflation as a cool, detached statistic, they experience it as a deep betrayal. It was this lopsided sacrifice that ultimately turned everyday hardship into a full-blown revolution. The state actually didn't run out of money first, it ran out of legitimacy. Let's look at Section 4, Interwar Germany. Economic pain weaponized into extremism. This specific historical sequence is just devastating, and it illustrates exactly how prolonged economic insecurity breeds radicalization. First, in 1923, hyperinflation totally wiped out middle-class savings. People literally watched their entire life's work become mathematically meaningless overnight. Then, in 1929, the Great Depression destroyed work. This prolonged grinding insecurity eventually morphed into deep resentment and fear, and authoritarian movements completely capitalized on this. They didn't arrive selling tyranny, right? They arrived selling order to a people exhausted by chaos, offering convenient targets to a public that felt entirely betrayed by a rigged system. If we pull back and look across all these eras, the fingerprints of systemic rot are remarkably consistent. Sacrifice is one-sided, elites are protected, wealth constantly funnels upward, and hardship feels permanent for the vast majority. But most dangerously, the system absolutely refuses to reform itself. People don't revolt just because life is hard. I mean, life has been hard for most of human history. They push back because the system feels permanently rigged in favor of insiders. Jumping to Section 5, the modern era, 2008 and the Great Separation. When the 2008 crash hit, governments and central banks immediately rushed to rescue financial institutions. But the public noticed a massive asymmetry. When banks fail, It's called systemic risk, and it requires a multi-billion-dollar bailout. But when families fail, losing their homes and jobs, suddenly that's called personal responsibility. The insiders were saved, while everyday households just had to absorb the foreclosures and the unemployment.
Which brings us to Section 6, the core duality. There is not one economy.
That 2008 bailout effectively split our world right down the middle. Today, we essentially have the asset economy, made up of stocks, property, and businesses, which has been absolutely booming. And right alongside it, we have the paycheck economy, governed by wages, rent, and bills. If you owned assets, the economic recovery of the 2010s was very, very real. But if you lived in the paycheck economy, the recovery was slower, thinner, and for a lot of folks, entirely invisible. A rising market doesn't automatically mean a rising society. It just means the asset owners are doing fine. As inflation came roaring back in the 2020s, it acted as a massive sorting machine. Wages lag way behind the cost of living, while scarce assets just explode in value. Rent increases trap tenants, but they enrich landlords. Monopolies can easily pass higher costs right on to consumers, and high interest rates punish borrowers while actively rewarding lenders. Even the current AI boom. It excites investors holding the assets, but it creates pure anxiety for workers who fear obsolescence. Inflation isn't just a price problem, it's a power problem. It protects insiders and punishes anyone without assets. Section 7, a crisis of legitimacy. Societies are held together by belief, not GDP. Ultimately, systems produce incentives. And the real warning from history isn't just that inequality exists. The true danger is when hardship becomes permanent for the many and highly profitable for the few. Systemic legitimacy rarely collapses in a single dramatic Hollywood moment. It erodes quietly, bill by bill, rent increase by rent increase, bailout by bailout. It erodes until the public just stops believing the economy is a shared system at all.
So, who is getting rich? Well, the honest answer is the people positioned closest to ownership, credit, and political rescue. But I want to leave you with a rather chilling thought. When people stop asking if the system is efficient and start asking who it actually serves, history shows us exactly what happens next. The center weakens, politics radicalizes, and the illusion of a shared society completely shatters. The true danger isn't just today's wealth gap, it's tomorrow's realization. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the structures around